Rain swept across the high plains like grief made visible, washing the color from the land until everything shimmered in shades of gray and sorrow. Inside a leaning cabin at the edge of the valley, a woman sat upon the muddy floor, her back pressed to the wooden wall, beneath a cracked window. Her dress, once a bright native red, now clung to her body like a second skin, heavy with rain and dust. Her name was Tala Redbird, 28, a mother worn thin by hunger and miles. Two small boys huddled beside her, Nico and Talon, each no older than 7, their eyes too quiet for their age. The wind outside moaned through the boards like something alive. The door creaked open, and with it came a storm. A tall figure filled the frame, broad-shouldered, dripping with rain, coat dark as the thunderclouds behind him. He paused, letting his gaze sweep the small cabin. The air shifted. The children drew closer to their mother. His voice came low, almost reluctant. "You're coming with me." It wasn't a threat. It was the kind of sentence born from compassion buried under years of restraint. He was Boone Callahan, a man of the trail and silence, his face carved by weather and loneliness. The kind of man people in Dry Creek whispered about, a giant cowboy who preferred the company of wind and cattle to that of men. He had found Tala's wagon half buried in the mud by the ridge. The horses were gone, the wheel shattered. He could have kept riding, but something in her stillness, pride mixed with despair, held him there until the rain forced a choice. Tala said nothing. Her lips trembled, but her gaze did not waver. Boone knelt down, his shadow folding over her like shelter. "You'll die here," he murmured. "Them too." His eyes flicked to the boys. "Come on now." For a long heartbeat, only the storm spoke. Then Tala nodded once, a motion so small it might have been mistaken for defeat or courage. Boone lifted her easily, his strength quiet, practical. The boys followed, clutching a ragged blanket between them. Outside, the wind bit sharp and cold, but his horse stood waiting, steady beneath the pelting rain. He helped them onto the saddle, her arms around her son's, and walked beside them toward his cabin. Each step was a promise against the night. When they arrived, the fire inside hissed and cracked, breathing life into the shadows. Boone laid her gently on a cot near the stove, leaving space between kindness and caution. "Eat," he said, setting down a bowl of stew. The boys devoured theirs in silence. Tala took hers last, slow and wary. Boone didn't watch them eat. He kept his hands busy with the fire, pretending not to notice the tremor in her fingers. By dawn, word had already spread. In a town like Dry Creek, secrets moved faster than dust. "The big cowboy's taken in an Indian woman," muttered the men at the saloon. "2 kids too," added another, spitting tobacco. "Ain't right." The laughter that followed was brittle and mean. Boone heard it when he went to buy flour. He didn't answer. He simply turned and left, the sound of their mockery trailing behind him like flies. Back at the cabin, Tala stood by the window, the morning light washing her face in pale gold. She could feel the judgment pressing against the walls, invisible yet suffocating. "They don't want us here," she whispered. Boone looked up from sharpening his knife. "You're here now," he said simply. It wasn't comfort, but it was truth. Days folded into one another. The rain softened to drizzle. Boone repaired her broken wagon in the yard while the boys played with scraps of wood, building a crooked little horse. Tala watched him through the doorway, her hands kneading bread with slow, deliberate care. She had stopped flinching when he moved too close. Once, as he passed her a jar of molasses, their fingers brushed. The moment was brief, but it carried more weight than words ever could. At night, when the cabin quieted, she would hum an old song, soft, wistful, something from a world that no longer existed. Boone listened from his chair by the hearth, his hat low over his eyes. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the ache. It reminded him of the wind that used to howl through the canyons when he was a boy, lonely, beautiful, endless. Then came the night he returned from town with blood on his knuckles. He hadn't meant to fight, but one man had said too much, spat her name like it was dirt. Boone had tried to walk away. The man had followed, smirking. "What's she giving you that you can't buy?" he'd sneered. The next thing Boone knew, His fist connected with the man's jaw, the sound loud as a gunshot. When he entered the cabin, the firelight caught the raw skin of his hands. Tala rose from the corner, alarmed. "You shouldn't fight for me," she said quietly. He looked at her, eyes dark and tired. "Wasn't fighting for you," he replied. "Was fighting because they were wrong." For the first time, she smiled, small, uncertain, but real. The storm outside had begun again, tapping softly against the window, a rhythm almost gentle now. She reached out and took the bowl from his hands, setting it aside. The silence between them stretched like a bridge being built, plank by plank, across the chasm of everything they had lost. Boone leaned back, closing his eyes as thunder rolled far away. Tala looked down at her boys, sleeping beside the fire, their faces peaceful in the flickering light. Something inside her eased, just enough to let hope breathe again. Outside, the rain fell steady, as if the heavens themselves were washing away the gossip, the judgment, the pain. Inside, a quiet pact was made, not spoken, but felt. The storm, for now, belonged to someone else. The rain ended as quietly as it had begun. Weeks passed, and the plains turned from mud to gold beneath the sun's slow forgiveness. Boone Callahan's cabin, once silent as a grave, now carried the sounds of life, children's laughter, the creak of drying herbs by the window, the low hum of a woman singing as she mended clothes by the fire. Yet beneath this fragile calm, unease stirred like a snake in the tall grass. Boone could feel it every time he rode into Dry Creek and saw heads turn, whispers follow. The sheriff found him one morning outside the general store, polishing his saddle. "Boone," he said, voice dry as sand, "folks are talking too much. They don't take kindly to you keeping her here." His gaze flicked toward the hills where Boone's cabin stood. "You can't save everyone, friend." Boone's jaw tightened. "Didn't know I needed permission to offer a roof." The sheriff sighed, lowering his tone. "You've got a good name here. Don't ruin it over a woman the town's already judged." Boone didn't answer. He mounted his horse and rode back into the wind, each hoofbeat carrying the weight of words he couldn't speak. By the time he reached the cabin, the sun was dying, laying red fire across the horizon. Inside, Tala Redbird sat weaving a strip of cloth, her face calm but distant. She had heard the whispers too, she always did. She could feel them in the way Boone's shoulders had begun to stiffen, the way his voice came softer lately, careful not to draw attention. That night, while the boys slept, Tala sat awake by the dying fire. Her heart beat in time with the crackling logs. The world outside this cabin had no place for a woman like her, yet she knew she could not stay hidden forever. Shame was a weight she had carried before Boone ever found her. She rose quietly, packed what little they had, her mother's beaded necklace, a strip of her tribe's red fabric, a few pieces of bread. Her ankle had healed enough to carry her through the valley. She wrapped her sons in their coats, whispering for them to be brave, and opened the cabin door. The night air was sharp, stars glittering like cold eyes. She led them toward the ridge, where the land fell away into a forest swollen with rain. The earth was soft beneath her feet, each step a prayer she didn't know how to finish. Behind her, the cabin faded from view, just a faint orange glow against the darkness. When Boone woke at dawn, something in the silence told him they were gone. The fire was out, the blankets folded, the cot empty. For a long moment he stood there, the room breathing around him, until he saw the small footprints in the mud outside. He didn't curse or shout. He simply took his hat, holstered his revolver, and whistled for his horse. The tracks led toward the hills, faint but steady. Clouds were building again in the west, and the wind carried the scent of rain. Boone rode faster. He found the broken wagon trail, the creek swollen to a brown, raging current. On the opposite bank, he saw them, Tala holding one boy close, the other clutching her skirt as the water licked at their boots. "Tala," he shouted over the roar. She turned, startled. "Go back," she called. "We'll make it across." He spurred his horse forward, dismounted, and plunged into the icy water. "You can hate me later," he yelled, "but you're coming with me." The current pulled hard, dragging at his legs, but he reached her, wrapping one arm around her waist, gripping the boys with the other. They stumbled together through the torrent until his boots struck solid ground. When they reached the bank, Tala collapsed, coughing, clutching her sons. Boone knelt beside her, water dripping from his coat. "You think I care what they say?" he growled softly. "You think I'd let you die just to keep my name clean?" She lifted her head, eyes blazing. "You don't understand," she gasped. "They'll never stop. I can't be the reason you're hated." Boone's voice broke, raw and low. "Let him talk. I've spent half my life alone, so I wouldn't have to listen to men like that. I'm done hiding from ghosts that ain't mine." The rain began again, gentler this time, falling like forgiveness. Tala stared at him, her anger fading into something quieter, heavier. She reached for his hand, hesitant, trembling. He didn't pull away. For a moment, the world seemed to pause, the wind still, the creek murmuring like a secret between them. By nightfall, the storm had passed. The cabin's windows glowed warm against the darkness. Boone sat by the fire, binding a small cut on Tala's arm while the boys slept nearby, their faces peaceful once more. She watched him in silence, his rough hands careful as he worked. "You could have let me go," she whispered. He looked up, eyes steady. "Could have," he said. "Didn't want to." The next morning broke clean and bright. The plains shimmered, the wet earth breathing steam. Tala stood by the door, her sons chasing each other in the yard, laughter echoing through the quiet. Boone split wood a few yards away, his movements slow, deliberate. She poured 2 cups of coffee, stepped outside, and handed him one. "We start again?" she asked softly. Boone took the cup, his rough fingers brushing hers. "Yeah," he said. "We start again." They stood there in the sun, not speaking, letting the light find them where the storm once did. The world hadn't forgiven them. Maybe it never would. But for the first time, Tala didn't need it to. The horizon stretched wide and waiting, and in the hush between wind and heart, something fragile yet unbreakable began to grow.